All right, welcome back, everyone. As you can see, I'm still on the road. I'm actually in Texas right now, just wrapped up CPAC, and I'm sure many of you saw that Trump actually spoke at CPAC today. So we'll be going over that, a bit of what's happening with him. The CPAC organization also posting a video about Trump and his new lawsuit, class action lawsuit against all the big tech companies running social media, Google, Facebook, Twitter, and apparently YouTube deleted his video. Deleted the video on it, giving a bit more weight into the idea that maybe, let's say, maybe the lawsuit may be justified. We'll go over what they're saying with that, why they're claiming they deleted it, where things are heading with all this. A lot more other stories to go into, folks. We're talking also about some issues with race politics. Remember, we've been talking for a while how, well, these CRT, critical race theory policies may actually be illegal. Well, folks, it looks like there's some judges already ruling on that. And so we'll be going over that, a few other stories, a lot to go into. And as always, folks, it's good to see you all here. Yeah. GoPro Joe, you said, we are the 99%. That's funny how that term was co-opted, actually. It's true at this point, I'd say. Memes over outrage, SMF, YouTube has no chill. It's true. Like, they censor anything that goes remotely against, the narrative they're trying to push, which is becoming more common, but also we'll have to see how long it can actually last, right? Lug Puka, he said they're afraid of him because he can't be bought. And it's true as well. Bribery is unfortunately common even in the U.S. politics. I've had many politicians tell me this. It's very common. And so to have let's say, politician with integrity, they need to have many standards in place, the least of which, although a big one, is not taking bribes. And I can't imagine they'd be able to bribe Trump. For those of you asking, the tea tonight is also, again, Hotel Earl Grey, a very rare brand that I can only find in hotels, but is holding me up for the night. And so that said, let's all get started. All right, so first off, let's jump at what's happening with Trump getting censored already. Well, a video with Trump getting censored. Let's go into what's happening with it. And then we'll go into a bit of what he said during CPAC, so we'll go into that as well. All right, so first off, Epoch Times reports, YouTube deletes CPAC's video about Trump's lawsuit. Group can't upload content. And it says here, YouTube has deleted a video uploaded by the American Conservative Union, which hosts the Conservative Political Action Conference, for allegedly violating its terms and conditions about COVID-19. The group said on January 11th. In an emailed statement, the American Conservative Union, ACU, said its video featuring former President Donald Trump's announcement that he would file lawsuits against Google, as well as Facebook and Twitter. YouTube issued a strike against the group's account 2 days after the video was uploaded on July 9th. The big tech firm also banned the organization from posting for 1 week, according to the statement. And as a result, YouTube has prevented ACU from sharing content from CPAC 2021 Part 2 in Dallas, Texas, where I'm at currently, actually. I was there all weekend. Met somebody there, too. It was great seeing y'all, including, in addition to that, former President Donald Trump's speech on Sunday, June 11th, today. Trump spoke there today. The statement said this. Now, Trump was scheduled to deliver CPAC's headliner speech on July 11th, today again. According to the ACU, YouTube said the video contained alleged medical misinformation. That's why they're banning that video, and also gave them a strike, which made it so they're not able to show Trump's speech. They gave them a strike for having alleged medical misinformation regarding COVID-19 when it cited the reason for moving the video. And the group said YouTube didn't cite any examples that violated its policies. And this is important because this is becoming one of the standard issues you're having with a lot of people finding they're being censored and then bringing lawsuits against these companies, is that, one of the technical elements of them being able to kind of legally censor under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, one of the reasons they use for that is they can say it was done in good faith. But if they don't do it in good faith, like give you a clear reason why they're doing it, you can sue them. And YouTube just did that. It seems they didn't give any examples of what content violated its policies. This is one of the officials stating this, Chair Matt Schlapp. He said, "It is clear that YouTube censored CPAC because we stood with former President Donald Trump on his lawsuit against big tech. So this is yet another example of big tech censoring content with which they disagree in order to promote their political positions they favor. And they further suggested that YouTube opposed a comment from Trump referencing studies about hydroxychloroquine and saying it's effective in treating COVID-19, which I thought they changed that narrative already. I thought they already kind of rolled back the hydroxychloroquine thing because people are saying it's a working remedy, doesn't cure it, but maybe something that helps strengthen your immune system. There has been research on that since, so it's weird that they would continue censoring this. But they say this. They say Google's political biases heavily influence YouTube's decisions of misinformation, and that the political beliefs of Google executives take priority over the speech rights of Google users. Now, that said, let's talk about a couple things Trump is doing now, and then we'll go into also what he said during his speech today. First off, though, of course, Trump has filed a class action lawsuit against Google, which runs YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And this is what's happening with that. Let's go over it. It says here, former President Donald Trump said Thursday that he is eager and willing to provide sworn testimony in a deposition in his lawsuits against Google, Twitter, and Facebook, so he can talk about the 2020 election, the one that just happened, of course. He said, I look forward to it, actually. And Trump told us to Bill O'Reilly on Thursday night about possibly sitting for a deposition coming a day after he announced the lawsuits. He said, I love talking about the election fraud. And the former president unveiled the legal action during a news conference in New Jersey on Wednesday, again, as we mentioned, saying he wants a judge to rule on the social media giant's alleged censoring, blacklisting, and shadow banning of users over political speech. And the lawsuit will also seek punitive damages. He said, and Trump said this, O'Reilly asked this, and we'll go into it. O'Reilly asked, they're going to want to take a deposition from you. You're going to sit for a deposition? And Trump replied, sure. I think we've had a lot of them, frankly, which if you look at his presidency, that's accurate. He says a part of it will be the election. Now, if you're talking about January 6th, that will also be about the election. And so, in other words, he's suggesting that part of the lawsuit is also going to be them talking about maybe censorship issues related both to the election and the Capitol breach on January 6th. He says, are the lawyers prepared, though, for the war? There will be a war. You know that. Are you prepared for it? It's O'Reilly asking. And Trump replied, everything is a war. With me, life is a war. It says presidency looked like that as well with all the attacks against him. And he said, yeah, we're prepared and somebody had to do it. And Trump replied to that saying that a number of people have urged him to file lawsuits against Google, Facebook, and Twitter. And so they have filed it, folks. And it's going to be a class action lawsuit. I haven't yet seen them bringing on other people yet. We can assume that they'll start that process soon of people who've been censored or believe they've been censored by these platforms. And well, frankly, at this point, that's a whole lot of people. But we'll have to see on it. And of course, I'll be keeping you updated on it. One quick important note on the lawsuit as well is that as part of the lawsuit, what they're actually asking for, what they're actually asking for as well is part of the initial steps is that these platforms, Google, Twitter, and Facebook, lift all these forms of censorship temporarily under court order. And if that happens, it's going to be very interesting to watch. If these platforms suddenly have to lift their censorship policies, if YouTube has to stop demonetizing people, stop shadow banning people, if Facebook has to stop, suppressing likes on posts or whatever, and if Twitter has to stop suppressing or shadow banning accounts, we're going to watch and see what was actually being done to a lot of these accounts. Because one of the problems we have for a long time is that because we don't have access to the back ends of these systems, we don't know sometimes whether a channel is actually being suppressed or not. This channel right now, Crossroads, they've openly demonetized us. We do know they demonetized us, but we can only assume they've shadow banned us and other things because we do know that the subscriptions on this channel have frozen. They froze pretty much after they censored us, and we were growing by leaps and bounds. You might remember that the trajectory of growth we were on was like 100K a month when it was really taking off. And then it just totally froze once they censored us. And so with that, we can assume we can assume they shadow banned us and we can assume they censored us, but we couldn't really prove it other than the, of course, demonetization. But we can say it was a real strange anomaly that our growth was going super fast and then just stopped cold right when they did that. But if they do lift these types of censorship standards, if a court orders them to do so, it'll be interesting to watch, actually, that we'll get to see whether the growth starts again after that, whether the views go up again after that, whether things change again after that, because we'll start to see the actual effect that these policies may or may not have been having. Now, on that note, let's talk about what Trump actually said today, because I'm in Texas today, folks. I've been here all weekend. And Trump, of course, spoke at CPAC. And Epoch Times has a story on it. Now, I should note, I don't think you can watch this on YouTube. They'd probably shadow ban you. I got a wild hair. They'd probably shadow ban you. And, you know, in the past, they've done this. People who posted Trump's speech at last CPAC, they deleted the video and then gave the channels a strike for doing so. And so we can assume we can't actually post it here, right? We cannot actually post it here, but you can watch it on Epoch Times. And so, folks, if you want to watch Trump's speech, check out the epochtimes.com. But we have a story here for you all. Let's go into what he said. It says here, Trump in CPAC speech promises to defeat critical race theory and Marxism. Trump's promising to defeat Marxism. It's a big promise. Let's go into it. It says here, former President Trump on Sunday addressed the Conservative Political Action Committee, CPAC, in Texas and promised to defeat critical race theory. And he said, with the help of everyone here, we will defeat the radical left, the socialists, Marxists, and the critical race theorists. And he said, we will secure our borders. We will stop left-wing cancel culture. We will restore free speech and free elections, and we will make America great again. Now, critical race theory, of course, is perhaps at the forefront of today's culture wars in the United States, as parents across the country have wrangled with teachers, school boards, and teachers' unions especially, over whether it should be taught to public school students. And CRT is strongly associated with the anti-racist movement, cancel culture, as well as diversity, equity, and inclusion workforce training, as well as the trainings they're giving to our military and police. According to Legal Insurrection Foundation's criticalrace.org and other critics of the ideology, CRT is an offshoot of the earlier critical theory, a European Marxist school of thought that originated in the early part of the 20th century, especially the Frankfurt School at Columbia University in the United States, I should note. Now, Arizona Governor Doug Ducey, who approved a bill last week that prohibits local governments from teaching it to his employees and so on. A lot of people standing up against it. We'll have to see what happens with it. There's a lot of pushback against it. Trump is saying he's going to do more. But Trump said this. He said, we're the majority and it's not even close. Talking about and he said as well that the battle is so much bigger that policy proposals or Supreme Court rulings saying the radical left has infiltrated or is controlling centralized institutions such as bar associations, like Giuliani getting his legal license taken away, universities, schools, Hollywood, big tech, and large banks, which I think we've all seen do stuff like this. And some of the pressure campaigns waged by Democrats, he said, are straight out of the communist countries around the world. Throughout his speech as well, Trump contrasted the immigration policies of his administration with those of the current administration, Biden's, accusing Joe Biden and Democrats of mishandling border security. Now, what does this mean, folks? Keep in mind that Trump is right here laying out basically what will be the main policies and main talking points and, say, battlegrounds for arguments going into 2022 and the elections to, well, where Republicans are hoping to retake the House and the Senate, and where even Democrats are warning that they have a strong chance of losing the House. Part of this, folks, is due to redistricting, because, of course, we just had the census. Many Democrat states actually lost seats for the House through the census where they count populations, and many Republican states have gained seats. And what does that mean? If it's 11 seats that have to be overturned for Republicans to get a majority, even if the voting stays the same, Republicans are probably going to retake the House. And so Democrats are kind of freaking out about that right now. At the very least, it would make it so that Biden would have to become more moderate relatively, because there's a lot he couldn't do. But also retaking the Senate is a big issue, and there's a pretty good battleground around that as well, folks. But what Trump is talking about right now are the points he's going to be bringing up, and it seems that the Republican talking points under the Trump side of it, because remember, Trump has started his own PAC, Political Action Committee, and he's actually going toe-to-toe with the RNC, another PAC, the Republican National Committee, and he's really remaking the Republican Party right now. Really, in the U.S., of course, we have two main parties, the Republicans and the Democrats. I think most of you know this, but just saying. But they've changed in nature quite a bit. I'd say most of this happened under Trump. On the Democrat side, you had the Democrat Socialists of America, the Grassroots come up, Freedom Road Socialists, these types of organizations that are very, very, very far left. And within groups like the Squad, AOC, and these individuals, really, the Democrats have been kind of grappling with how to balance things, and not very well, frankly, with how to deal with the far left. And it seems to be the case now that the far left is really kind of taking over a lot of their policies. These very radical individuals from the unions and from the grassroots within the Democrat Party are really influencing the direction of the politics. And so the establishment of the party has shifted that way. And meanwhile, with the Republican Party, going back to 2016 and the midterm elections with Trump, remember, a lot of Republicans didn't run for re-election, and a lot of Republicans also went over to the Democrat side. George Bush being one of the big names with that, right? Even backing Obama. The establishment of the Republican side, a lot of them went to the Democrats, but a lot of them also stayed. And part of the battle within the Republican side now is not just this, let's say, trying to push back against Marxism and critical race theory and all these things that they see happening on the Democrat side, but actually pushing against what they see as these Republicans in name only, rhinos within their own party. And so you're very likely also going to see maybe some states having multiple Republican candidates, unless they can deal with that properly. And then, the Democrats, of course, getting behind their candidate. And so if Republicans have a split vote and can't balance things properly, we'll have to see how it plays out. But Trump is, of course, starting his own political action committee, has already. And with this, he's going to be working on putting up his candidates under the MAGA movement. And I would say this is really becoming the new heart and soul of the Republican Party, whereas the establishment has moved more towards the Democrat Party. The new political parties in the United States are really between the establishment and this whole Trump movement that started up. And this is going to be where the political battle is. Meanwhile, as we're talking about censorship and all these things, it's important to remember the context of this, folks. Because remember, just after Biden was elected, after Biden was elected, a lot of the media came out, and a lot of different organizations came out, and they were talking about how they needed to get rid of this whole Trump phenomenon, how they needed to get rid of the things that Trump started, this social movement, this grassroots movement that came alive under him. And part of that is, of course, the actions against the Capitol Hill protests, where they're trying to make Trump supporters look like they're extremists and so on. Part of it's just the ongoing labeling. The reality is, folks, they did this to Trump during his entire presidency. And people stuck with him during his whole presidency, regardless of the political labels, regardless of all that. I really doubt the attacks are going to change things. And there has been some evidence of the Democrats as well suggesting that this whole narrative of January 6th and so on isn't having the weight they anticipated in terms of getting voter interest. And so there's a lot going on, a lot of different factors weighing into what's going to happen, really, when it comes to the 2022 elections. But technical surface points, Republicans do stand to at least retake the House. But we'll have to see how it goes, of course. Let's see. Rachel Roca is just noting, he said, Josh, I can get a notification on my mobile for you on Crossroads, but not on my laptop. No notification. Yeah, thanks, folks. We've been hearing this a lot. Of course, we're censored, totally demonetized, but it does help still if you can like and share this video. I try clicking the notification bell. I don't know if you'll get notifications, but try and click it. But again, we run on a pretty regular schedule, so we do appreciate if you come in and regular times and check out the show. That said, folks, of course, at the in a little bit, we're going to go over questions, so about 10 minutes. If you have questions, do leave them in the chat. We'll try to get to them. But first, let's go over a few more stories. I want to talk what's happening with this virus. Because, well, there's mixed narratives on the vaccines and how effective they are and what's going on with them. And I think it's important to talk about, right? So let's talk about what's happening. Yeah, let's see here. So first off, folks, let's talk about what's happening with the, let's say, natural antibodies versus the vaccines and the protection you may or may not get from them. Let's talk about it. Now, Epoch Times reports people who recover from COVID-19 are at very low risk of reinfection, according to a new study. And part of the reason for that is if you get the virus, you get sick, your body develops the antibodies. And they're finding now that the antibodies are about just as able to protect you against the virus as the vaccine shot, or maybe more so depending on how you look at it. Let's go into what it's saying here. Now it says, people who have contracted COVID-19 and recovered, i.e. you have antibodies, should know that the risk for reinfection is very low, a doctor said after the publication of a study he worked on. Researchers analyzed records from Curative, a clinical laboratory based in San Dimas, California, that specializes in COVID-19 testing and has been conducting routine workforce screening during the pandemic. Now, folks, trust the science, right? You know, the irony of this is that this is science. This is science, right? But, you know, you may get censored for saying it these days from the same people say trust the science. It's actually interesting to note that in some countries, even Israel, for example, they had the vaccine passports. In a lot of countries, if you had the antibodies, it would be seen as equivalent of having had the vaccine. Israel had a policy like this, for example. I was talking to some folks about it. And so it is recognized in many parts of the world that if you've gotten the virus and you have antibodies, and yes, they can prove you have antibodies, yes, you have the same type of immunity, it seems, and maybe even better because natural antibodies tend to be more adaptable. But of course, it seems to be the case that a lot of what's happening here isn't really about the science. It's about something else, and it's not clear what that is because they don't seem to recognize antibodies in the U.S. at least, although they do in other countries, as being a sufficient proof of immunity. And it really is getting behind this weird door-to-door push and all these other things they're doing to try to push the vaccine, while not really talking about the value of, herd immunity, antibodies, and so on. Now, on this article a bit more, it says none of the 254 employees who had COVID-19 and recovered became reinfected, while 4 of the 739 who were fully vaccinated were contracted the disease. So they only did this it was a smaller sample, so take it what's worth, 254 employees who had the virus and recovered antibodies. None of them got the virus. Of the 739 who were fully vaccinated, 4 of them got the disease, COVID-19. And so it seems to be the case here that not by a huge margin, but the antibodies in terms of this rate do seem to be more effective. But you know, it's small numbers to take it what's worth. Now they're saying, this is the researchers, they're saying the big takeaway was that if you are not vaccinated and were not previously infected, 1, you have a very high risk of getting infected. 24% of employees over a year tested positive. However, on the flip side, if you were vaccinated or previously infected, your risk was near 0. Dr. Jeffrey Klausner, clinical professor of preventative medicine and medicine at the University of Southern California's Keck School of Medicine, told the Epoch Times. And so, folks, if you've had the virus and you have antibodies, and you probably have antibodies if you've had the virus, you can tell people to trust the science, that you have antibodies and you're more immune than they are, even if they have this whole vaccine. So you're, by the science of this, you're more immune with the antibodies. Now, Klausner and Dr. Noah Kojima of the University of California, Los Angeles' Department of Medicine joined with curative workers to analyze the records, and they released a preprint or pre-peer review version of the study online last week. Now, on that note, if you have gotten the vaccine, interesting news for you all, you may need to get another shot, your booster shot. And Pfizer's CEO is now apologizing to people for not giving a heads up on the vaccine booster shot announcement, according to Dr. Fauci. It says here, Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla apologized on July 8th to National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease Director Anthony Fauci for failing to give the Biden administration a heads up before news emerged that the company planned to seek authorization for a third dose of its COVID-19 vaccine. And Fauci told CNN, the CEO, who is really a good guy, got on the phone with me last night and apologized that they came out with that recommendation. The Epoch Times reached out to Pfizer for comment. Take it for what it's worth, folks. I think we were told early on, and we've been talking about it, that you're going to need booster shots if you get the vaccine. It's all kind of Russian roulette at this point, frankly. Take your risk getting the vaccine. Take your risk getting the virus. Your choice. But we'll have to see what happens with it. If you do get the vaccine, there is some evidence that the Delta variant is infecting people with it, depending on which one you get in some countries. A lot of weird stuff going on. Some people say it's not that bad if you have the vaccine, that it doesn't affect you as badly. But you do need to continue getting your booster shots with some of these, which is what they're saying now. Although the Biden administration is at least suggesting right now that at the current moment, they're not planning to make people get the third vaccine. So even though scientifically you may need the booster shot because it wears off, scientifically you might need it. They're saying you don't need it. And so take it for what it's worth, folks. Now, on this note, you may have seen news, for example, that the Biden administration may be sending folks out on the streets, and folks, you may be getting knocks on your door of someone inquiring whether you've been vaccinated. Now, they claim that these individuals do not have access to government databases on whether or not you're vaccinated. They didn't really disclose whether this means that they won't access third-party databases, i.e. of private companies. Remember, the key word they used was saying that they're not going to access it, was saying that the government does not have a database. The government does not maintain a database. They never said they would not access a database on who has been vaccinated and who has not. But if you've been waiting around hoping that you get more information on the virus, you can look ahead to what's coming, folks, because you may get a knock on your door and one of the officials with the Biden task force on the ground is going to come knocking at your door, very likely asking whether or not you've been vaccinated and trying to give you more information on it. Now, with this, it's interesting to note that there's a lot of legal challenges that maybe are going to arise over this, and also a lot of concerns specifically around informed consent. Informed consent. Remember this word, folks. Informed consent. Because nurses right now are saying this is what's lacking with a lot of this. Now, Epoch Times reports last week, America's frontline doctors, AFLDS, came to speak in Kansas City, Missouri. And AFLDS's founder, Dr. Simone Gold, brought her message that COVID-19 is nothing to fear, that there are treatments available. Now, I won't go too deep into this. I'll start with one of her quotes where she said, "We all feel like we saw the things were not right, but physicians are all about reputation, and with today's cancel culture, they, the patients, are looking at us and trusting what we're saying. And there was this unspoken line at my job. If I had to deviate from the narrative," and she continues, "that's why I left. When we received vaccine talking points," doctors allegedly receiving vaccine talking points, and Absher pointed out as well, "We're not against vaccines. I've gotten every vaccine you can except this one. But if they push it, the more it repels me. It just makes me realize that the public has a fundamental lack of understanding on what clinical trials are." And she explained the 3 long phases of clinical trials, which have not been finalized for the COVID-19 vaccines. Still clinical trials, folks. Now, before phase 1, there's animal testing. Then phase 1 opens up for trial of small groups of people where they are compensated for allowing themselves to be experimented on. You're paid money to get experimented on. Then in phase 2, if animal testing or phase 1 does not show serious issues, a larger group of people is tested. Normally you get paid for it. And finally, if that group does well, then phase 3 goes forward to test even more people in hospitals with their consent. With their consent. And if issues are found during any of those phases, the drug must be perfected, meaning they cannot get FDA approval, they cannot release it. But they're saying, how do we go from that to just, we're going to give this to people, and if they have an adverse reaction, that's just that, right? That's the story of COVID. It's that everything has deviated from normalcy, especially the medical industry. We're seeing a lot of anecdotal evidence. We had a better system for collecting data, but what we haven't been given careful now is saying, I don't understand why they're pushing so hard. If you look up FDA regulations, they're not even following their own regulations. You cannot say something is safe while it's still in clinical trials. So, important information for y'all. It's Russian roulette. Do it, don't do it. Your choice. But folks, that said, let's jump into let's jump into the questions for the night. So again, folks, if you have questions, leave them in the chat. We'll try to get to them, and then we'll go to some more stories afterwards. I want to talk about what's happening with some of the injunctions to get some of these race politics issues. We've been talking for a while about how they may actually violate the law in the United States. It seems to be the case now that some judges are actually seeing this as well. Let's put it that way. All right, so first question for the night. This is from Linda Kemery. Said, Josh, what is your input on judges assigned to Trump's lawsuit? We'll have to see. So Trump is filing his lawsuit. I believe it's in New Jersey he's doing his lawsuit. You have to remember the Trump team would have calculated this pretty carefully when it comes to where they file this lawsuit. No, it might have been Florida. You have to forgive me for not remembering. Basically, when it comes to this lawsuit, you have to understand that the Trump team would have already calculated their chances of actually succeeding with it and where to file it. The big thing they're going to have to watch for is if the court tries to move it to California, because this is actually what happened to James O'Keefe just recently. James O'Keefe, as many of you know, is also suing a lot of these social media companies. And one issue he dealt with, Florida. Thank you, folks. Thanks for clarifying. That's what I thought. So Trump is filing this in Florida. He announced it in New Jersey, But one of the things you have to watch for is whether they try to actually move the case. But the judge is going to be the one to make that decision. This is actually what recently happened with James O'Keefe, who's also suing some of these social media companies. The social media companies tried to get in the lawsuits, moved to California, but the judge refused to do so. And when you're dealing with civil cases like this, it's it's more on the local level. We can see how it goes. It might move up, but it might stay on the local level. We'll have to see. But currently, Trump has a very good chance at winning it. If it stays in Florida especially, he has a very good chance at winning it, along with everybody else who signs on with him. At the very least, if the judge in Florida puts, say, a hold on censorship at all these big tech companies, it's going to be very interesting, especially as we move into 2022 and the midterm elections. Yeah, just clarifying again, that was in Florida. Thank you, folks. It was in Florida, but Trump announced it in New Jersey. This is from Jasmine Cheng. He said, hello, Josh. I listen to your every podcast. Oh, thank you. And actually, those of you who don't know, too, we actually do have podcasts. We're on Spotify, iTunes, and all that. So if you want to listen to Crossroads on the road, we do have a podcast. It's just the audio from our shows. And so you can listen to Crossroads. You said, listen to your podcast. Today I wanted to ask you a question that I wanted to ask you for a while. Do you know that there is no single document that COVID was isolated? Yeah, that sounds about right. I haven't seen that. In the early days of the virus outbreak, what was really interesting, and nobody really talks about it now, is remember that in China, when the virus was spreading, that actually there were Chinese scientists who claimed they isolated the virus and then released information about the structure of the virus and so on. And that was when a lot of people started researching it and looking into the weird anomalies with it, including like allegations that it had like similarities to the HIV virus and all this weird stuff. And then all the scientists started retracting their documents after, notably, the Chinese Communist Party disappeared some of those scientists who made the virus structure public. Remember that? Why would they do that? If we're going to hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable for this, that's one of the biggest smoking guns that nobody talks about. The Chinese Communist Party, there were scientists there who claimed they isolated the virus and then released it publicly. And scientists around the world began researching and publishing findings on it. And they were stating very interesting things about the strange structure of this virus. And it was research on that helped link it to a lot of other things, including the weird research that was going on at this Wuhan Institute of Virology. This was, of course, the documentary we did last year. It was very interesting to watch. But The Chinese Communist Party shut it down. They disappeared those scientists. And then a whole lot of scientists abroad began retracting their reports. That was the catalyst. That was the main catalyst that had them start launching this whole, calling it the China virus is racist, calling it the Wuhan virus is racist. Don't talk about the origin of the virus, or we'll launch trade war against you like the CCP tried doing to Australia and other countries. That was the catalyst for that. And remember, folks, if people were actually trying to actually deal with this virus and make cures, having that information, which was briefly made public, would have been extremely helpful. Why would the CCP retract that? Why would the CCP disappear scientists? And why would scientists around the world who are writing about it retract their findings after that? This is one of the big smoking guns, and one of the, I think, several of the questions that really need answers. Questions that hopefully, I can only do so much to get. The questions hopefully will get answered eventually. Let's see here. Next is from Cynthia L. He said, "Hello, Josh. Can you and Epoch Times join Trump in his class action lawsuit?" We'll have to see. We'll see. I don't know where things are going with it. We'll have to look at it and see whether it makes more sense for us to do that. When it comes to legal issues, I can only say so much. So I don't know. Maybe, but we'll have to see. It will be very interesting, and I think, frankly, important in some ways for companies that have been censored to also get on this class action lawsuit or to sue them individually. But I do think this is going to be very important. I think it's going to be a big discussion going forward, especially if they're forced to stop censoring people briefly. Because if they stop censoring people briefly, the floodgates are going to reopen, and we're going to actually see which opinions are the most valid online. We're actually going to see which YouTube shows are the most popular online, which voices on Twitter are the most popular on Twitter, which pages on Facebook are the most popular on Facebook. If that censorship gets lifted, we're going to watch and see what's been kept from us, the reality that's been hidden from us in terms of what the population and the popular vote, they keep talking about the will of the people. We're going to see in terms of, let's say, public debate and popular discussion, what the will of the people is. Once censorship goes away, and we'll have to see whether the judge actually makes that ruling. It'll be very interesting to watch, and on the note of whether Epoch Times will get involved, yet to be decided. I'm not the one who makes that decision. We'll have to see what happens with it. This is from Gomez Adams. He said, "Hi, Josh." Good question here. He said, "Hi, Josh. The U.S.-Canada border remains closed, but the U.S.-Mexico border is wide open, allowing criminals and undesirables to pour in. Can you explain the logic in that?" Well, yeah. I mean, maybe it's the same logic when during the height of the lockdowns, when everybody had to stay in their homes, and the media was saying, if you go outside, you're killing grandma because, your grandma's going to get infected, even if, maybe Andrew Cuomo maybe put her in a nursing home with someone infected. But, if you go outside, you're going to kill grandma, right? Remember that whole narrative? Don't go outside, folks. Stay in your home. You're not, you're uncompassionate. You're going to kill people because you might spread the virus unknowingly if you go outside. And so just stay in your homes. Don't go to work. Shut down your businesses. Shut down your churches and just stay where you are. And then tens of thousands of people go out and protest on the streets and burn down cities and burn down towns and smash buildings and cities and loot stores, and the police can't do anything about it. And then people are getting let out of prison because of these slush funds from big corporations and wealthy billionaires, from people who claim they're fighting against the wealthy billionaires. Remember when that happened, folks? And then when people were like, well, wait a second, how is it that they're not being a health risk if they're protesting shoulder to shoulder on the streets and burning down their communities and rioting and looting and so on, and we have to stay in our houses or we're killing grandma? Remember that? And then a lot of the health officials came out and said, well, this is more important, right? When it comes to the border, maybe they feel this is more important. Because what we're seeing as well, remember we were talking about when it came to these facilities, these holding facilities they've had, they're having huge numbers of people who are infected with the virus. Remember, folks, the Delta variant and other variants are already spreading in Latin America. A lot of these variants that are spreading really strongly in Latin America are, let's say, people coming across the border getting promised free health care are coming to the U.S. for treatment. are coming to the U.S. because they're getting promised, $1,500 in some states from the government or more, are getting promised all these different programs that are even denied to U.S. citizens. And so you have a lot of people pouring across the border. And yes, many of them do have the virus, as data has shown. I can't remember the numbers on it, but it was pretty high. We talked about it before. And in addition to that, they're putting them in these holding cells in close proximity to each other, shoulder to shoulder, laid on the ground. These are like little incubation chambers for the virus. And they're taking them and they're releasing them into the heartland of the United States. And so, maybe they feel that the issue is more important than the health crisis, which actually says a lot about how they actually view COVID, I would say. This tells us a lot, folks, over how serious they actually think the virus is, because they regard illegal immigration and allowing mass illegal immigration to the United States as being more valuable than the public health crisis that they've been warning us about. Just as they view these protests on the streets and burning down of buildings and all this stuff as being more important than lockdowns and mask mandates and protecting people from the virus. There's selective enforcement on these types of policies based on the importance that the public officials making these policies place on these issues. And so when it comes to BLM and riots and critical race theory and these things and illegal immigration, the people doing the policies seem to believe that those issues are more important than public health when it comes to the dangers or lack thereof of the CCP virus or COVID-19. Essentially, that's what's happening in my analysis. Take it for what it's worth. Let's see. This is from Gloria Ennis. Gloria Lennis. He said, "Why are they trying so hard to get people to take the vaccine?" Well, everybody's feeling that right about now. Maybe they actually care about people's health. I mean, maybe they are legitimately concerned about people and, legitimately believe that the virus or the vaccine may protect people. Maybe that's the case. Maybe it's something else. At the very least, though, we do know that they're not recognizing the antibodies in the United States, which if you have antibodies, your protection against it is just as high, if not higher, statistically higher, although the numbers are limited on it in terms of the studies. And so why are they not recognizing that if it's about public safety, if it's about actually being immune, having actual immunity, then really having the antibodies should be taken the same as this. So why is that not being factored in if it's actually about public safety, right? Why is that not being factored in? Important question to ask. But we can say that they regard it as important enough to send people door to door to try to get you to take the vaccine. Take it for what it's worth. You want it, get it. If not, your choice. But frankly, the actions they're doing with this and the push they're doing with it, the strong push they're doing to get people to take the vaccine, to the extent that they're literally going door to door and talking about this along with other campaigns, I think is really making a lot of people more wary about it, I think. I mean, when the government tries to get you to do something, it's one thing. When they really, really try to get you to do something, it's another. When they start violating your, normal health codes and privileges between you and your doctor, and when they're doing clinical trials and trying to mandate it, with all these things, I think it's going to make people more wary of the real intentions behind it, rather than make people more willing to get it. I'll have to see what the numbers are, and it kind of reminds me of what happened in California, where again you have Governor Newsom, who has been. They are going to hold the special election in September to see whether or not they remove him from office and put a new governor of California in. But remember, as part of the pushback against the signature campaign, which got him out of office, one thing he did was made it so that every single person had to get a second chance to retract their signatures, and it was in the 3 digits numbers of people who actually retracted it, if even that. It seems like one of those things that government policies sometimes don't affect people on this level, especially people right now have, by now I assume, already made their decisions of whether they believe the safety of the virus or the vaccine and the risk of the virus is worth it, and made their decisions whether or not they want to be vaccinated. We'll have to see whether they can actually change anybody's minds with this campaign. We'll have to see. And it's definitely making a lot of people more wary of them, I would say, that they're trying so hard. Now, that said, folks, I've noted we are totally demonetized on YouTube. Maybe it'll change with this lawsuit. We'll have to see. But in the meantime, folks, of course, we have started Epoch TV, which will hopefully be the future news of video journalism. Crossroads is there. All of our official shows are there. All of our official interviews are there. We also have our exclusive documentaries. And if you haven't watched America Rewritten yet, the documentary I just did, check it out. You can watch it without having, we can watch it for free with a free trial. All you need for a free trial is your email address. And, keep it, don't keep it, it's your choice. All you need is an email address. Type it in. You can watch the documentary. We have more in the works, big announcements on this coming up, and a lot going on there. That said, folks, we're going to show you a quick trailer of some of the stuff we're working on over there. So let's jump into that now.
The curriculum in Williamson County includes cannibalism, suicide ideation. Some grades talks about rape. Fourth grade talks about abortion. It's very racially charged, points out angry white people. It's very anti-American, points out only America's faults and none of its redemptive qualities. And it's even anti-authority and anti-tradition and anti-church. 7-year-old girl who came home and said, "Why does everybody hate me? Because I'm white." There's children with even darker thoughts saying that their family should be killed, to include their grandparents, because they're white. We've had a psychologist actually address our group, and he talks about the psychology of shame. How shame is a doorway to many darker, deeper things. One of them later on is child suicide.
All right, great interview. You can check that out on Epoch TV. Again, folks, if you don't have an account, you can get a free trial. All you need is an email address. So check it out. That's Epoch TV, epochtv.com/crossroads. You can find a link to it in the description, also in the chat. Highly recommended. Check out the interview we did with Robin, talking about her movement, Moms for Liberty, which she's part of, where they've actually gone through the curriculum being taught to your kids in schools. If you want to see what they're actually teaching kids in schools under these critical race theory narratives, if you want to see what the teachers are being told to tell kids in terms of the curriculum they're given with the books they have, check out that video because we go over it. We actually show some of the books, we show some of the curriculum, and we go pretty deep into it. So check it out. We also talk about how it's actually affecting kids. You have kids in therapy. You have little kids getting therapy because they're getting traumatized by this stuff, because they're feeling ashamed of the color of their skin by these racist, discriminatory, and segregating policies that are now being taught. Check it out, folks. I think you'll really like it, because if you're wondering what your kids are being taught in schools, or you're wondering what they're actually teaching kids in schools, we go over a lot of that in that video. So check it out, Epoch TV, epochtv.com/crossroads. All right, folks. That says, jump into a few more stories. I want to talk about race politics because we just talked about this a little bit, but something interesting here. Now, remember how we were saying, and you might have heard it here first or maybe somewhere else, but I think we've been talking about it quite a bit, that this critical race theory policy may actually violate the Civil Rights Act because it engages in discrimination, and also may violate the 14th Amendment or 15th Amendment of the 14th Amendment of the United States. It seems now that some courts and some lawsuits are getting behind this. And one of these now is a judge who has issued an injunction against Joe Biden's USDA over race-based loan forgiveness program. And it says here, a district court judge granted an injunction against President Joe Biden's loan forgiveness program for non-white people, ruling in favor of a Tennessee farmer who filed a lawsuit and argued the provision is unconstitutional. We'll get into that. U.S. District Judge S. Thomas Anderson ruled last week that the USDA should halt its distribution of funds through the program until the case is fully resolved. The program, otherwise known as Section 1005, was created under a provision of the Biden-sponsored American Rescue Plan Act that was passed by Congress earlier this year. And they're stating this: however important the goal of eliminating the vestiges of prior race discrimination, and it is important, the government's efforts cannot withstand strict scrutiny. Therefore, plaintiff has shown a likeliness of success on the merits at trial. The judge wrote in favor of farmer Robert Holman, who was being represented by Southeastern Legal Foundation and the Mountain States Legal Foundation. Now, while there isn't a cap on the amount of loans that can be granted by the USDA, some $3.8 billion has been provided to the program, and those found may be gone before the case is resolved. The judge ruled in explaining why he created an injunction against the program. Elaborating further, Anderson ruled that Holman has shown a substantial likelihood that he would prevail on his claim, meaning that this farmer is very likely to succeed. Because, folks, deciding who gets something based on the color of their skin is discrimination. And under the Constitution, the government is not allowed to do this. Government is not allowed to do this, meaning public schools are not allowed to do this, meaning government agencies are not allowed to do this. And so this is a very decisive case. We'll follow it a bit further. Now, on this, they're saying, absent action by the courts, social disadvantaged farmers will obtain debt relief. He wrote, while plaintiff will suffer the irreparable harm of being excluded from that program solely on the basis of his race. And the farm loan program was part of Biden's plan to promote equity, not equality, but equity, and would pay off the loans of Black, Hispanic, and American Indian, Native Alaskan, and Hawaiian farmers, and award them an additional 20% of the value as a cash payment. Reparations in some regards, right? Southeastern Legal Foundation noted. And on this note as well, folks, you've been watching these statues get torn down. You've been watching buildings in America get defaced. You've been watching the founding fathers get slandered and history rewritten. Our America Rewritten documentary talks about this quite a bit. But the campaign's continuing, folks. And in Charlottesville now, they've taken down statues of Lewis, Clark, and Sacagawea. And remember, this is where people were warning it was going to head. Trump was warning it was going to head this way, that they start with something a lot of people can kind of agree with, right? Something controversial like going after Confederate statues. Then they move on to ones of non-Confederates. Then they move on to ones just of American founding fathers and American heroes. Then who knows what's next, right? They went on, folks, from going after Confederate statues to now targeting statues of Lewis, Clark, and Sacagawea. They already been doing this to an extent. They were defacing statues of Jesus, Gandhi, you name it. Let's go into what's happening in Charlottesville, Virginia right now. The Charlottesville, Virginia City Council, and this is the government doing it, not protesters, voted unanimously to remove a statue of Meriwether Lewis, William Clark, and Sacagawea from the city following a special emergency meeting on Saturday afternoon. The decision was made shortly after the crew finished removing Charlottesville's statues of Confederate commanders Robert E. Lee and Thomas Stonewall Jackson. The city council has set aside about $1 million to cover the removal of all three statues. They're paying $1 million in taxpayer money to destroy this history, saying the project follows the successful removal of the statues of two Confederate generals this morning. You hear that, folks? The project follows the successful removal of these Confederate statues. And this is according to city spokesperson Brian Wheeler, who said this in a statement to the media, and said the completion of the work ahead of schedule has allowed the removal of the third statue, one which City Council has previously expressed a desire to have removed after a work session with Native American delegations in November 2019. In other words, folks, it was a program to remove the Confederate statues, right? They set aside money to remove the Confederate statues and said, oh, looks like we have a bit of leftover money. Oh, what a coinkydink. Let's remove these statues as well that we don't like. That's what happened. It was a policy to remove the Confederate statues, and now it's taken out additional statues, ones that were unrelated to that, including one of a Native American, Sacagawea. Now, that note as well, folks, it seems to be the case that gun laws are really spreading in the United States. The Biden administration is trying to push them. California is doing quite a bit on it. There's some serious Supreme Court cases set to be heard, which could really determine gun laws throughout the entire United States. But it seems the trajectory of the policies, if the Supreme Court fails on that, is trying to make it, at least in California, so that it's either too expensive or too much of a hassle or to buy guns or own guns, or a danger to manufacturers because they can get sued now for some of this. And Epoch Times is reporting California judge rules that shooting victims can sue gun manufacturer. It says a California judge ruled that victims of a 2019 shooting in San Diego that left one person dead and 3 wounded can sue the manufacturer of a rifle and the gun shop that sold it. Superior Court Judge Kenneth Metal ruled Wednesday that the victims and families in the shooting in Poway, California can file a lawsuit against Smith & Wesson, one of the largest gun manufacturers in the world, over alleged negligence. Now, wouldn't it be great if you can file lawsuits against other things of negligence, such as maybe taking a vaccine that may cause adverse side effects and maybe kill you? Wouldn't that be a thing? Rather than having to go through a special vaccine court that has money set aside, taxpayer money, to pay people for things like this, you could actually sue the companies. Well, they're not doing this across the board, folks, but they are doing it to gun manufacturers and gun stores. And it says here, lawyers for Smith & Wesson argued that the lawsuit was barred by the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, a federal law that shields gun manufacturers and sellers from liability. In other words, it violates the law for them to even do this, the courts. The 2000 law prohibits arms manufacturers and dealers from being sued over crimes that were committed with their products, although there are now exceptions to that rule. The plaintiffs in the suit allege that the gun maker violated California state law by designing the M&P 15 rifle, similar to the popular AR-15 rifle, so that it can be easily modified. It's saying you can easily modify anything on that note. Easily modified. And the suit, which is backed by gun control group Brady Center, also claims Smith & Wesson's marketing attracted impulsive young men with military complexes who are particularly likely to be attracted to the unique ability of AR-15 style weapons, according to reports. Metal also ruled that the gun shop, San Diego Guns, could be sued for selling a weapon to the alleged shooter, John Ernest, who the plaintiffs claimed was only 19 years old and lacked a hunting license that would have exempted him from California's 21-year minimum age to purchase a gun. Fair enough if they sold a gun to an underage kid, maybe. But it's going to be very interesting to watch how this goes when it comes to legal challenges, especially because technically there's a law that protects them from this. Again, folks, that would be the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act that does protect them from this. You know, the concerning direction America is heading in, I was talking to some folks at CPAC from Brazil. If you guys are watching, you're awesome. And they made an interesting point, which is that, in Brazil, you have Bolsonaro, who's president, who's actually very conservative. But you have the courts, the Supreme Court, which is very, very, very far left. And the Supreme Courts are pretty much, ruling by decree right now. They can do whatever they want. They're even filing charges against people not even filing charges, going after people without even filing charges. They're going after different groups like this and doing things like this, or pretty much they're ruling by decree, regardless of what written law says. Technically, written law here, the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, protects them from this. But there's a judge saying they don't care about that law. They're putting it through anyways. This is the concern you have going forward, is that judges no longer recognize written law. If judges no longer recognize written law, then how can the public even know what is legal and what is illegal? How can the public know what they're protected from and what they're not protected from? How to, let's say, go about their work in a way that will not get them sued if the law states that they're safe in doing so, but then a judge changes his mind because of a politically popular issue and says, well, I don't care about that law, I'm doing it anyways. This is one of the problems you have, folks, in terms of the trajectory of things like this. We'll have to see what happens with it, whether it stands, whether another judge steps in to block it, but this is a big case on that note. Now, one more point, folks, one more story for the night. I want to talk real quick about what's happening in Maricopa County in Arizona. A lot of you are paying attention to the audits. We'll go over this and we'll call it tonight because it's getting late, but I want to talk about it. It says Arizona Senate conducting new count of Maricopa County ballots. So they're really triple checking the numbers now. The ballots cast in Arizona's largest county in the 2020 elections will be counted for a third time on orders from the state Senate. Nearly 2.1 million ballots submitted in Maricopa County for the presidential contest were tabulated as normal by election officials. They were recounted by hand by audit teams hired by the Arizona Senate in a process that was completed late last month. And now the Senate will do its own recount. They'll provide a number to compare to those from the county and from the auditors. And they're saying Maricopa County says there's 2,089,563 ballots. We did the hand count, and they're finalizing that number, but we just want a third number to tie everything together. Make sure we have more. The more data points, the better. And that's Arizona's former Secretary of State, Ken Bennett, the Senate audit liaison, who told us to the Epoch Times. The new count will focus on the number of ballots and will not count the actual votes, unlike the first two tabulations. The Senate will use two counting machines that it purchased to complete the count. Arizona Senate President Karen Fann, a Republican, told the Arizona Republic, quote, "We're going to run she's saying this, yeah. "We're going to run all the ballots through and see how they match up through these counting machines. If there ends up being a difference, we have another count." And the machines arrived on Friday, so they already have them. They appear to be from U.S. paper counters. The machines are said to be able to count up to 2,000 sheets per minute. And the count will go quickly, likely wrapping up in under a week, according to the audit officials. Now, we'll see what comes out from this, folks. We're still waiting for the audit to be finalized in Arizona. The officials there are also waiting for access to additional information to complete their audit. After it's completed, we'll have to see how long it takes, but they're saying that they're going to be releasing a public report on it. And I'll keep you all updated on this as we go forward. All right, folks, that said, it's getting a bit late. I'm still on the road, heading back again to good old New York. And folks, again, a lot of stuff going on, a lot of special features we're working on, some great documentaries coming out. Again, please, check out Epoch TV, epochtv.com/Crossroads. You can watch our new documentary, America Rewritten. All you need to watch it, if you get a free trial, is an email address. And so put in your email address, you can get a free trial, check it out. I think you'll really enjoy it. So check that out. And that said, as always, folks, appreciate the support. Always enjoy doing these. Please take care of yourselves, stay informed, stay free. Thank you. The American story was once seen as a light of strength and freedom for the world. It created a government by the people and for the people, where rights were given not by leaders, but by God. Yet now the very fabric of the nation is under assault.
Without us, I don't think you'd have free market capitalism. I can't think where it exists in its essence anywhere else.
I think the American idea is forward-looking, it's optimistic, it's the idea that children will live better than their parents.
The Constitution mostly is a guarantee of what government cannot do.
If we lose the Constitution, we lose our liberty, we lose our prosperity, we lose our way of life, and the world loses because the world has been depending on us for a half century.
So every tyrant in America right now, from the radical left to the globalists, to big tech, to the Communist Party of China, are all trying to destroy the US Constitution. Because if they can do that, they have complete power over every aspect of our lives. That's their dream, and that's our nightmare.
What is the real story of America? Why did the Founding Fathers choose a republic over a democracy? And what would the world be if the bedrock of the American Constitution was lost?